With some incredibly difficult decisions looming for the Montreal Canadiens, one insider in an article today suggests Montreal make a trade fairly soon to make room for some certain players. We have to dive into that. Plus, Arber weighs in on the roster controversy surrounding Beck, Kapanen, Dvorak, and Evans. And well, his conclusions have a lot of Habs fans talking. And finally, we have some quotes from Coach Marty, from Juraj Slafkovsky, and from David Reinbacher himself about what to expect from David this season. There's a lot to get into coming up on this episode of Habs Digest, and we're going to dive straight into the quotes, Jesse. And look, everything comes in time. I'll be real. A lot of Habs fans are pretty okay with this Reinbacher situation, but there's always those vocal minorities that are saying, hey, he's just not showing what we want for the 5th overall pick. And I mean, I guess I can't blame him on the one hand, but on the other, it all comes in time. Reinbacher today, Jesse, was saying how, he's just 19. He'll be 20 soon. If it's in Laval, if it's in Montreal, no matter what it is, they have a plan for him. And, well, yesterday, Juraj Slafkovsky had some words of advice, and I wanted to share this. He basically said, I would say be confident talking about Reinbacher. I don't think I was confident enough when I came here. Just trust yourself. He's a good player already. Just be confident, play your game. And Coach Marty today, Jesse, said this. He said, I would tell David Reinbacher to focus on himself and not compare himself to anybody because comparison's a thief of joy. I'm sure he wants to play in the NHL as fast as he can, but there's a process to get there, and everybody gets there at their own pace. And I know we're not worried about Reinbacher, but it's good to hear that he has so much support from his teammates, from his coaching staff, and support about his play style, which was very evident in the preseason game. Just how calm, cool, collected he was. Those flashes of potential, just being super solid, are there. And honestly, to me, again, the biggest thing for him is going to be time to get more used to the North American ice. And I see a world where he's a legit star for this team still.
And I love that Slav is taking from his experience and right away just giving it to Reinbacher. Said, this is what I wish I could have kind of done better coming to the NHL. Let me just pass on this shared experience to you, right? And we've learned so much from Slav. One thing about being patient with our rookies, among many other things, we continue to learn from the young man all the time. But that's a big one. And for me, Josh, I just been kind of thinking about, like, with Slav, with some Reinbachers, getting that advice from him is kind of relevant because I feel like just like those bigger guys it's kind of scientific as well, right? Like your height and your weight kind of grows. There's no substitute for those reps that you need, just kind of getting adjusted to your own body, right? Like at that increased height, at that increased weight, there's really no way of getting around it where you just need to get the time. And for these bigger guys, it takes a little bit more time, but we're really not worried about Reinbacher at all. Again, Martin St. Louis with the great advice as well, just really focusing on yourself. For myself, like, I haven't been worried about Reinbacher. Why? Because I've seen that confidence from him. Even if it's not there all the way on the ice yet, off the ice is there. And I definitely feel like it's going to translate. Like last night, doing a little bit more subtle things, but some really good zone exits. And we always need to remember, even when we're talking, not just about Reinbacher, but like Mailloux, Barron, et cetera, it's like, it's often the less that you see from them and the less that they stand out is often a greater kind of indicator of them doing a good job often enough, especially with Reinbacher, who is not necessarily always going to be that offensive guy, right? But Habs management really knew what they were doing. And again, we've learned from Slav that we need to be patient with our prospects.
That's the thing. Young defenders, bigger ones too, like they don't always break into the NHL at the same rate. So just a matter of time. Like he looks too solid to not be a solid NHL player. The potential's still there. It is going to take him some time. I definitely agree. And I agree that the offensive upside, maybe you wish you could see a little more, but at the end of the day, I'm still thrilled. Slav is thrilled. Marty's thrilled. We're all excited to see what's coming from Reinbacher next year. Let's leave some love for David Reinbacher down in the comments. We're going to move on quickly, Jesse, to the second topic. Look, there might be more to this than we thought. So Arber today wrote an article for The Athletic, which I will link down below. As always, great article. Really thought-provoking as well. It dives into the situation that we're all thinking about, and actually the next part of the video will also be diving into that, so make sure you stick around for some interesting trade talk, Jesse. But I want to dive right into this article. And yeah, oh, there we go. Let me do this. There we go. It was really good. He basically goes in and says, Canadiens training camp, the battle at center will not solely be settled based on merit. And he goes on to say that right now, Beck and Kapanen look like better alternatives to Evans and Dvorak through, well, I guess each of them playing one game. Kapanen's played 2 years of pro hockey. Beck is going into his first year now. Kapanen could go back to Timrå if he doesn't make the NHL. But the big thing here is the conclusion, and I wanted to read this out. Basically saying training camp is far from over. There's lots of time for Kapanen and Beck to change the calculus of the decision by making themselves indispensable Or, in my opinion, there's still time for them to take a step back. We don't know if they're going to hit a wall pretty quickly, right? But that bar's very high if you want to make the team, especially considering the factors involved. You know, whether they could waive a guy like Dvorak or try and make a trade super fast. Again, we'll get into that a bit later, but look at how they performed so far. At the end of the day, Jesse, next year, you still have a guy like Kapanen and Beck with a much clearer path to the Montreal Canadiens. So, really, it would not be the worst thing in the world to see these guys not make the team, especially considering it would be some quick, fast roster moves, not to mention, like, I don't know, you know, you kind of, it's kind of between a rock and a hard place, because you either get rid of Dvorak, a veteran, a decent locker room guy, and you bring in a young guy, and maybe that doesn't rub some people the right way, or you see a guy like Kapanen who is just looking amazing in training camp, and then you don't reward him for outplaying some of the veterans. That also doesn't look good. They're between a rock and a hard place, but at the end of the day, I got to agree with his conclusion that, like, no matter what, Jesse, really next year is the year that we're going to start seeing these guys really take that chance. So for now, I wouldn't totally mind if it doesn't get solved immediately.
Young guys definitely want to impress early on. The question is just going to be like, does it make sense to hold on for Dvorak for maybe, you know, because if you're trading him, maybe you're getting a better return at the trade deadline. For sure, like proper asset management would dictate, okay, you hold on to him near the trade deadline. There's a little bit more of a need and you get more of a reward. My contention with this is that, is it really worth it? You know, getting a third round pick, let's say, instead of a fifth, for Dvorak by trading him at the deadline instead of earlier, right? Is that return on that really worth what you're going to get from the increased play that you're most likely going to get from a Kapanen, from a Beck? We know that winning faceoffs was a sore spot for the Montreal Canadiens last year. And again, if the Canadiens want to be in the mix, winning those draws, getting control of the puck is going to be a huge part of it. And we saw, like Kapanen, he went 8 of 14. Beck again was great, going 5 of 9 on the dot. We need to really win those draws. For myself, it's kind of debatable. Like, for sure, asset management, maybe keeping things kosher in the room. You don't want to just kind of ship out a guy like Dvorak too quick. But like being in the mix, it's all about taking ownership of the players you're putting out on the ice, right? Because there's no greater determining factor of a winning hockey team of who you're putting on the ice. So Habs management, they're definitely going to need to back up those words by their actions, by the lineup they choose to ice.
And it's going to be tough because there's also like this line between hockey decisions and personal decisions, right? And to try not to get personal relationships in the way of business, which is what hockey is at the end of the day, as you'll hear a lot of veteran players say after they get traded. It's just a business. But there are factors outside of just on-ice play that are at play here. How things will affect other players, their happiness, the culture around the team. There's so many things that we don't get to see. So it's a fantastic read. I suggest you go take a read out of it. And leave your thoughts about it down below. But Jesse, we're going to go on to another Habs insider, Marc Dumont, who posted an article that maybe dives into a more drastic, maybe more reasonable, maybe less reasonable solution, but definitely a faster one. And we've been talking about this since we saw Oliver Kapanen, honestly, even before the camp, Jesse. We were talking about, it feels like it's been ages since we've been talking about let's trade Christian Dvorak, not Jake Evans. I love Jake Evans. I know he's in his last year, but I can't. Anyway, let's get back into this here. So, Marc Dumont posted this, basically saying Montreal Canadiens forward depth chart. This is linked down below as well. Please go read it. It is very good as well. A trade would help. Straight up saying a trade would help, and let's go to see what he exactly had to say. He said, in a perfect world, the Montreal Canadiens would enter into trade negotiations with the team looking for a veteran forward. The return wouldn't be as important as the ice time that'd be liberated. And he said, look at the Kovacevic trade. The return wasn't great, but the real prize was the opportunity that was opened up for guys like Reinbacher and Mailloux. And even if they're not going to get NHL ice time this season, Jesse, it definitely makes it easier in the long term, especially with David Savard. Now, his contract coming to an end after this year. There's probably going to be some other moves happening. So ultimately, yeah, it's going to give these guys at least a higher role on the Val and a better shot at making Montreal. So trading one of these guys, even if it is a guy like Jake Evans, who I really don't think would pass through waivers, or you waive Dvorak, or you trade Dvorak, there's a lot of teams that would be willing to take on these kinds of contracts. The question is, how fast can you do it? And do you really want to rush it to get this done in time for the season just because of what you've seen from Kapanen? And I still think, like we said, Jesse, there's a lot of preseason left to play. We don't know what's going to happen with Kapanen. Is it worth trying to rush this thing out just to have this happen? I'm starting to think maybe it is.
Many factors to consider. A quick digression that Oliver Kapanen has looked better than Owen Beck, even though Owen Beck did get a point last night so far in camp. So that's really surprising to me, but there are definitely some different factors to kind of consider when it comes to this. Like Marty's going to have to make like a determination, like let's give an example of a player that deserves to be in the NHL, but you could still say is in that debate of Joshua Watt. Like Joshua Watt for me deserves to be an NHL player, but now you kind of need to make that same question when it comes to Kapanen, when it comes to Beck. Do you feel that they kind of deserve that as well? Because again, they've shown in the past, like trading Kovacevic, as you mentioned, to make room for younger players, that they have done this. And I think that that is so important to do. But this answer is definitely incoming very shortly. Stay tuned, folks, right? Because as the camp kind of gets more into like NHL caliber, regular season type team, that's when you're able to make that decision on, if they are ready. Absolutely, right? And for sure, the safe decision is, okay, let them kind of marinate and everything else. But there is a lot to be said about striking while the iron's hot. If you see a player playing well, yes, definitely comes across as hasty, right? Somebody does great at trading camp and you're starting to kind of make a trade for Devo. We are not talking about Evans. I don't think that he is the comparison in this whatsoever, right? But it's as it goes on, if these guys show that they're really ready with NHL level caliber competition, Martin, we kind of needs to be objective, right? And kind of say, who's just giving us the best chance to win every night? I think that's really important. Us Habs fans, we've been patient, but as we're starting to kind of get into this rebuild a little bit more, they're going to ask for a little bit more accountability, and they're going to want to know that the best players that we can put into every single position that lineup are being filled every night.
That's a great point too. And at some point you do have to take risks, and Montreal took a risk in that line trade for sure. And they're not like, it's not like they're risk averse. But when you're looking at things like this, like a guy like Kapanen, like I mentioned earlier, if he continues to show throughout this preseason that he is better than his contemporaries, that he just looks like the better player than whether it's Dvorak or Evans or whoever, you got to give him that chance. And I know, no one's always going to be happy because, let's say Kapanen gets sent back to Sweden. He could be playing amazing over there, development's great, and he's super excited to come back next year, but we're going to say, man, he earned his spot and didn't get it. Or he does make the team, Dvorak's gone. People might be upset that Dvorak was traded. Then what if Kapanen hits a rookie wall after 10, 15 games and he just really doesn't get it back together? We'd be saying, I wish he was over back in Sweden with Timber, with Olli Jokinen. There's always going to be what ifs, ands, buts, all these kind of things. But at the end of the day, like you said, Jesse, hit the nail on the head as usual with you put the guys out that you believe give you the best chance of winning. And that's where it comes down to Marty. Some big decisions are coming, and it's not just Marty. It's Marty, Jeff Gorton, Kent Hughes. There's going to be a lot more talk as the season draws closer, but let us know your thoughts on all of this stuff down below, because this is a fun little point of contention coming out of training camp. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for supporting every single day. If you're still watching now, again, we're trying to hit 15K subs. So if you're watching right here at the end of the video, we'd appreciate it if you hit that button down below. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.